Melanie McGhee. I'm the licensed clinical social worker and the founder of Acceptance and Integration Training. I've been practicing psychotherapy since 1984 and developed acceptance and integration training probably about 5 to 7 years ago. So AAIT really is the formation of my study with master therapists, Sara Ridner, Dick Alney, Bob and Mary Goulding, and others, but those were my main teachers.
I'm Sara Ridner. I am a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Tennessee, and I'm an acceptance and integration practitioner. I use acceptance and integration in conjunction with other methods, but I find acceptance and integration, I call it the spaceship of therapy, that it can go just about anywhere you need to go. Other methods I call the SUV of trauma therapy, where we can go a lot of difficult places, but acceptance and integration allows us to explore the trauma and to get a nice integration and resolution much quicker than traditional therapies.
One of the big differences, I think, starts with the fundamental principle that in a more traditional therapy, we're really looking at people and their conditioning and really treating just the conditioning. With acceptance and integration training, what we're doing, the principle that makes this difference, one of them, is that the true self is not encumbered by the limitations of a narrative. The true self is a being. And practitioners always have that in mind. So we're looking past the conditioning to help people untether from the conditioning to realign with who they really are at heart, authentically, true. Someone said the sovereign self.
It encompasses science and psychology and spirituality. And so all of those things come together, which is, I think, part of what makes it so powerful. Just like we teach clients the 12 steps, but the spiritual principles of the program do much more work than we could ever do in treatment. That's what carries the work forward. Trauma is one of the things that acceptance and integration can treat in an almost gentler, easier way, but with quicker results than some traditional methods that require you to sort of reprocess and go back through the story and tell the story again. There is value in the story, but sometimes we can get stuck in the story, and that's where we find a lot of tethered energy that can cause sort of moving through the trauma and releasing the trauma and resolving it. So I have found that acceptance and integration methods help resolve the trauma without needing to be in the story. We identify the charged elements of emotion that go along with the trauma. So we look at the thoughts, the images, the emotions, and the sensations. Those are the things that are going to show up when a person experiences a trigger from trauma. And so we identify those things and we work with those 4 elements as a starting point. And then we use these various processes to help the person let go and experience the freedom that comes from untethering from all that pain.
Well, I think too that the other thing that happens when we, in a more traditional approach, where we are really looking at people's experiences and how can we help them understand them better, or work their minds in a different way so they can think differently about it, or maybe gain new insight. And what we're really trying to do is help people shift identification from the conditioning to their real self. So as we untether, as Sara was saying, from thoughts, images, emotions, and sensations that bind us to various places and points of pain, as we release that, we naturally shift identification to a truer part of who we are. And that makes this very different, I think, than more traditional work.
We talk about the big T traumas where your life feels actually in danger, things such as assaults and sexual assault, natural disasters. People living in Hawaii right now are experiencing big T traumas. Little T traumas are the more emotional, personal traumas that are just part of being human, not getting picked for the baseball team, being humiliated in public, verbal or emotional abuse. We didn't used to understand that, and now all the brain studies and the learning more about trauma and its trauma methods have been developed. We know now that those little t emotional traumas affect the brain the similar way as the big T traumas. Oftentimes people will experience an image or an emotion first. And so a person may share what a trauma is for them. I'll share a personal example. So when I was 3 years old, I went through an experience of falling in water because I was playing too close to the edge. And so the image that I had of that was as I fell, I saw my father throw down his fishing rod. And of course then he came and scooped me up by the scruff of the neck, you know, because that was what he could get a hold of, but it was a very jarring experience. And so as I remember that memory, the emotion was fear, and the emotion was also, the thought was, it's my fault. So because his fishing rod broke, and even at 3 years old, I was worried that his fishing rod broke and it was my fault, even though he never said anything to it, and he was appropriately soothing of my distress, but I was cold, I was wet, I'd gotten water in my nose, and so when I thought about that memory, my heart, this body sensation would be a little heart racing, and my stomach would kind of feel like it was sinking. And so doing a method like that, that we do with acceptance and integration training, as we do the process, the body sensation calms down, the image fades away into just sort of empty space, and the thought is my fault does not feel as charged any longer. Since I processed that memory, I don't feel upset by it, but how that memory also shaped me, that thought of it's my fault, carried through to a lot of other situations in my life. And so as I resolved that sort of very core memory from a very early age, it's my fault does not come up in the same way as it used to. I don't feel responsible as much for other people's feelings, for other people's experiences. So all that sort of codependency that I developed throughout my life, that was my attempt to make my relationships be okay so that I wouldn't get abandoned. I don't experience that in the same way.
So not only the trauma, but it had ramifications in other areas of your life.
It reverberated.
And how long did the work take?
The work took all of 5 minutes.
That's also one of the things that's really unique about acceptance and integration training, or AAIT, we'll use that interchangeably, is that it happens so quickly. The work happens really quickly. So people who are suffering, and even suffering through therapy, by going to therapy, there's can be a re-traumatization just through the process. And we really aim to shortcut treatment and to help people feel better so that the therapeutic process itself is not traumatizing, but actually inspiring. Inspiring so people can learn to, one of the principles of acceptance and integration training is taking responsibility for and tending to your inner state is the source of your freedom. And as you experience these kind of changes in 5 or 10 minutes, it can be inspiring that, oh, I can feel better quickly. And it doesn't have to feel awful to feel better.
You know, treatment is getting shorter and shorter. Insurance is paying for less and less, and so we want to try to provide the quickest relief. So people are able to really, as they get more in touch with their true self, the fear of being left, the fear of being rejected, their own sense of feeling defective starts to decrease and resolve. They get to those deeper levels of the onion quicker. So
acceptance and integration training. So let me talk about each of those words because they're chosen very specifically. Acceptance is particularly related to acceptance of our own experience without the inhibition of judgment, criticism, or evaluation. It just means allowing ourselves to have the experience we're having without trying to stop it. You know? And there are methods that we have that make that much, much easier because there are things that are really hard to accept. You know, when we feel regretful about something we didn't do and we wish we would have, or regretful because we did something we wish we hadn't, or sad because there's all kinds, a full range of human emotion we all get swamped by. So accepting that can help us surf those waves a little easier. Then when we add integration, Now, what we mean by integration is the integration of two opposing psychological states. So there's the state of calm, and was it anger? Yeah, anger. You know, and so when those two states are experienced simultaneously and we can't separate them, that's an integration. And we have a lot of ways of helping people get to integration. Now, the consequence of integration, when two, like calm and sad, become one thing and you really can't feel them separately, I know it sounds nuts, but it really does happen. What happens is that creates a kind of inner spaciousness. And then the next time we are in a situation when we might encounter being mad because our husband's, I don't know, whatever, getting mad about something, it's very likely that we'll feel that same pop of inner spaciousness. And from that, our choices are clearer. We tend to make choices that are more aligned with our higher self, or more close to who we really are, rather than all of the reactive ways of being that are just so natural and reactive. We really want to, use this to cut that energetic tie between our automatic reactivity. So acceptance means accepting. It just means allowing, not resisting. You don't have to like it. Most of this stuff, none of us would.
Page 417.
What, page 417?
In the big book.
Yeah, right.
It talks about acceptance.
Right, acceptance. And and integration is those two opposing states. And the reason we call it training instead of therapy is because part of this work is empowering our clients with skills that they are then in training themselves to disconnect from the conditioning and realign. That's a lifelong experience. The other thing that I wanted to say about this is that though we're talking a lot about trauma, this work is being used in ministry to help with spiritual wounding. It's being used to address depression and anxiety. It's being used to help people in relationships dismantle their, I've been married almost 40 years. We have the same arguments for a long time, but when you untie from these pains, then you no longer have those same kind of arguments. So it's the usefulness. I mean, there's a gal in South Carolina who's using it to help servers, like, West restaurant servers, with things that go on with them. The usefulness
Business, to help people with their businesses.
My goal with this work is like, here's what psychotherapy currently looks like, here's what helping people currently looks like, now let's do this. And it's challenging because our ideas about helping people are so bound in the past. And my goal is to train as many people as can be trained so that anywhere in any city, particularly in the United States, you can get help, and you can get help fast. If you're interested in knowing more about training opportunities, you can go to AAIT.solutions, or you can find us on Facebook and at AAIT on Facebook.